Mic check. I see the green dots. That's a good sign. My phone is dying. I need to pop out the chat, I think. Okay. So, quick recap of where we are at. We have tasks and lists. A task can optionally belong to a list. We have these anchored popover forms to allow us to update the list that a task belongs to. We also have this popover form to allow us to control the labels. Wait a minute. There's no flicker. Yesterday there was a flicker. I updated. I pulled in an automatic merge yesterday. There's something. Maybe this? That's so weird. But hey, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, I guess they say. It's not flickering. That is like, that is awesome. Okay, anyway, sorry, distracted. We've got tasks, we've got lists, we've got anchored popover forms. We have our grouping sorting widget, which gives us these collapsibles. We've got our form, we've got our links, we've got transitions, we've got state being updated across the entire DOM. So what are we going to do today? Today, I thought it was time to tackle assignees. And in order to tackle assignees, we need to create the users table, and we need to allow users to sign up and sign in and keep track of which users own which lists and which tasks, and also which users are assigned to which tasks. So today is authentication and authorization. And I want to try to speedrun it. And I think that we can, because I've done this a few times and I have some patterns that I like to reach for. At the outset, I want to shout out the authentication zero gem from Lazaro Nixon. And This is a really awesome gem. It's also like an awesome idea for a gem. It is just a generator. It's going to inject code into your application. It does not hide code away from your application. And I'm a big fan of that concept generally. It has all kinds of features. And so for a more production grade application, something like this would be my preference and my recommendation. But um, I like for smaller and simpler projects to start smaller and simpler and to own and control things myself. So let's jump into the patterns that I like to use. Let's pull up routes first. So we need to allow users to sign up and to sign in. And I want to do that in a resourceful way. I wonder if GitHub Copilot has access to my microphone. That'd be weird. That's a little bit freaky, actually. That was exactly what I was going to write. So we need to be able to create users. That is the concept of signing up. And we need to be able to create sessions. That is the concept of signing in. Yeah, Dean, exactly. Something's going on there. It's a little bit too freaky. So in order to be able to create these, we need the new pages. And then for a user, after they sign up, we could show them their profile. That's where we could redirect them to, or we could redirect them to root. I think to start, I'm going to redirect them to root and just go in this direction. So this is where we want to head, but I want to use Rails scaffolding to get us there. So what are we going to need? Yeah, it would be nice. Hands-free coding. We're getting close to thought-free and hands-free coding. So we're going to scaffold a user, and I don't think we need a name right now. We can do classic, so we can say specifically, we can tell the generator that we want this to be a digest, and I think it's going to put the has secure password in the model for us. So let's start simple with just an email and a password. Let's go ahead and think through what we're going to want for our sessions as well. I like to store records of sessions in the database. This allows us to render a sessions index page and show the user all of their active sessions. This is a feature you'll see on something like Facebook or Google. And you can like delete them, right? So you can sign out of those sessions. And a session belongs to a user, and we can store the user agent and the IP address. And we can use that to enrich that sessions index page, which I'm not sure we're going to get to building today, but I like to have it. So we're going to generate these, and it's going to generate more routes than we need, and we'll sort of trim things back. But let's just start sort of planning things out. So after we generate, we already know that we're going to want just these routes. And so now let's think a little bit, now that we're adding the concept of authentication, let's think through how we want that to work. So we're going to need some routes that are protected, that can only be accessed when a user is authenticated. And there are other routes which are not protected. They are publicly available. Obviously, these two routes, sessions new and users new, need to be publicly available because that is how you will authenticate. And we need to be able to keep track in our application for all of the web requests that come in. Is a user currently authenticated? Right. This is classic stuff. We're going to need to use cookies. So let's go look at some other projects that I have worked on before, am working on. This is a method that I like quite a lot. Let's make this Ruby, and we'll just put these things in comments. So this is a method to sign in a user record. Let's think through like what that would mean and what that would take. So we're going to want to create a session for that user, storing the user agent and IP address of the current request. We're going to want to globally keep track of what the current session is inside of our Rails application, inside of the lifecycle of this request. And we're also going to want to keep track of this session across requests using a secured cookie. There are a few details here. You can read, I wrote a blog post on like I don't remember now, 7 steps you can take to the 7 quick and easy security wins for a Rails application. And a few of them have to do with securing your cookies, right? You want to sign them, you want to make them permanent. You want to make them HTTP only. When you're in production, you want to make them secure, only accessed over SSL. In local development, we're not going to be using SSL, so we don't. Want to put them on a cookie key, and we're going to need to read and write this, so I like to put this in a constant. So create the session record in the database, set the current session global variable, and set the cookie we can assign a user in. We're going to need the other side of this, which is a request comes in, the cookie has already been set, the user has been signed in, we need to authenticate them. I think I've got this over here. So these two methods are methods that I like a lot. Authenticate and authenticate bang. And I'll talk a little bit about why I like to separate them in this way. So let's talk about authenticate first. If we have a current session object, then the user's authenticated, return true. Otherwise, let's try to find a current session. So we will check, can we find a session using the cookie? Now, this is coming from 2 different projects. So let's line these things up. So if we can find a session in the database, given the cookies that we have for this request, let's set the current session and return true. Otherwise, we couldn't find a session, so we can't authenticate this user. And so our authenticate method returns Booleans, true or false. That's it. It has no side effects. It is a pure function. Our authenticate bang method is going to have side effects. So if we can authenticate, then we will return true, do nothing. Otherwise, instead of returning false, we're going to redirect to the new session path. So this is going to be the equivalent. What do they call it in Devise? It's been a long time actually since I've used Devise. Authenticate current user, something like that. Anyway, the method that will force redirect the user to the new session path if we can't find an existing session for them. So sign in to create a session, authenticate to find a session. Now, the final little detail in the sort of pattern that I like to follow for simple, basic authentication has one final piece, which has to do with this guard clause here. So if we sort of just had this set up as it exists right now, this guard clause would never make sense because it would never be true. At what point would we set current session? There's no setter anywhere. This is going to happen on a separate request. So under what condition might current session already be set when we get into the controller? Well, the final piece of the puzzle of the pattern that I like to follow is to use a constraint, a route constraint, to very clearly mark which routes are protected and which are public. And in that authenticated constraint, let's pull this over. I want to take advantage of the fact that in order to determine whether or not this request is an authenticated request, we're going to need to do this work, right? We need to find out, does the cookie have a valid session? I'm going to make this line up a bit. So in the context of a route constraint, we just get the request object. So we're going to have to do a little bit of work to make this possible. We need to get our cookies object. So we're going to build a cookie jar from the request. And that's going to allow us to get at the signed cookies. And we can ask this same question, right? So we just check, is there a session in the database for this cookie? Like, does the cookie have a value here? And if it does that value match a session in the database? If it does, right, we're going to return true or return false, and this will drive the constraint. But we had to make that database query. Like, we have to make it here when we are checking the route constraint. So this happens before we get to the controller. If we've already done it once and we have found a session, we should not waste the time and the computation to make the exact same query a second time. So in the constraint, when we do find a session, I go ahead and set current session, and that allows us to write this short circuit in authenticate. So in the case where a user has a session cookie and they are accessing a protected route, we only need to make one session query. But this is the heart of the simple authentication pattern that I like. There's a few more pieces. We're going to add a custom layout. So we'll use one layout for our protected routes and a different layout for our public routes. I'm going to need to make the views and set up the user and session controllers. And so there's like some finer grained details, but this here gives the heart of the logic. So let's try to speed run this, but also like genuinely understand everything that we are doing. So we're going to start by scaffolding our user. And let's commit this. So I don't need this anymore. Let's check out a couple of things. So let's look at our migration. Let's look at our model, we're going to need to pull up the fixture. Those are the main things for now. So our email, we need to make non-nullable. And we also want to enforce uniqueness. Do that here in the database. We want to match that in the model. Our password digest also needs to be present. Using the type of digest gives us the has secure password method here. This is a Rails method, very useful, cool method. If you don't know about it, you should go and read the guides on it. A lot of security hardened work has gone into this method. Just we're going to have uniqueness constraints, so these fixtures are going to be wrong. Go ahead and fix those. Whoa, I've messed them up. Now, there we go. So we can, well, actually, let's run the migration after we generate sessions as well. Let's just do that. Right, okay. I do need to run the migration first to allow that to run successfully. And for those who haven't seen, this is like just a discipline that I try to follow. I like to make sure that I atomically commit all of my command line all of my commands that I run on the command line that have side effects that change my Git repository. And that way I can always come back, and I like to take the command and the output, put them in the description. This allows me to see very clearly when there are, I sort of want a pure function for this Git commit to say, like, I did this command, it had this effect, commit that. If I then go in and tweak the code, that'll be a second commit. But it makes looking back at the history of the repository much more useful because you have these smaller commits, and some of these commits you can see very clearly. They sort of have this characteristic of being like a pure function. You can see the input, you can see the output. Oh, I maybe didn't need to run the migration. I have a typo here. Whoops. Oops, grabbed the wrong window. And let's wait. I might want to change. No, we can allow these to be optional. Actually, I don't. Well, actually, I've changed my mind. They'll always be there. They might not be useful. And if we want that index view to be in any way useful and meaningful, like, we need some data there. So let's just go ahead and make them non-nullable. session. Yes, Justin. I talked about authentication zero at the start, and it does do a lot of this. And I made the point that for more like production grade projects, this is what I use and this is what I would recommend. For smaller projects, more like hobby projects, I actually prefer to drive all of it myself. There are some like small differences, and I um, I find it faster to get just the parts that I want, and I know precisely what they're doing and how they're working. It doesn't have the authenticated constraint. It doesn't split authenticate from authenticate bang. There's some very small differences, and so when like this is all that I want, I just like to do it myself. I'm a little bit, I don't know, OCD in that way. So let's make a little controller concern. Authenticatable. Module. Authenticatable. I need to remember. And we'll have an included block. We're going to set up some helpers. We'll do that in a bit. Let's go over to our routes. And simplify these. 1, 3, I call these public routes. And private authenticated routes. Let's make our constraint and then we can see how we were using it, right? It's just a simple block. And we're actually going to change this now because this root, we're going to make this authenticated. So this is a root inside of this constraint. Hey, Block. Yes. For those who are coming in, we're hand rolling authentication. This is inspired by Authentication Zero, a gem that I love, a gem that I have used, a gem that I would recommend if you are doing authentication yourself in a project that you want to make money with. For hobby projects, I have my slight variation on the simplest possible version of Authentication Zero, and I prefer to hand roll it. But yes, absolutely, it does this and more, much more. And when you need the more, you should just use it. But saying that, you should also really study the code that it generates and put it into your application and make sure that you understand precisely what it's doing. This is one of the things that I like about rolling my own. I know every single line of code, what it is, why I put it there, the intended effect it is supposed to have. So if a bug does come up, I can react to that bug incredibly quickly because I have a very rich understanding of the system that I am building because I really have thought about every single line of code that I have put into it. And that can be incredibly useful. It can be time consuming for sure, but that time is rewarded whenever you do have to refactor your application, fix a bug in your application, debug a bug in your application. So don't just run the generator and like go on your merry way. Make sure you understand like what is has secure password? How does it work? Why is it doing these things? Why might you want to set your cookies with these options and not other options? Why sign a cookie? Should you not sign the cookie? What are the pros? What are the cons? Why make it permanent? What does it mean to make it permanent? Why am I using a constant here? Why am I not just using a symbol? Why is this check and not just true? Like there are answers to all these questions that I've dug into, having done this pattern across, I don't know, 5, 6, half a dozen apps at this point. Um, so I love authentication 0, but don't get too lazy, especially around authentication, and don't and fail to take the time to really understand what your code is doing. It is important. Okay, we've got our authenticated constraint. I'm going to put it in here. Now we have our authenticated root. And I swear, is it listening to the mic? This is weird. So I actually don't like authenticated root. I like user root. But the fact that it suggested authenticated root right after I said authenticated root is a bit sketchy. I don't know. So we're going to make our public root now sessions new. So let's do a quick commit here, though we're not quite done. I'll do a couple commits. Let's call it non-nullable. Okay. We're in a decent place, but we still have some work to do. We need to update these controllers. Don't need all of these folders open. So our users controller. A few things. Let's get rid of controller actions that we aren't using. So for us, we're not using these, not using that, not using that. We're just doing new and create. So we don't need that, which means we don't need that. So we just have this. Then, oops, the same for sessions. We're just doing, oops, new and create. And what you will find is oftentimes when you add authentication into your application, you tend to show something about the current user in your base layout, right? So it's common to put a header, and somewhere in the header, you do like current user.email. Show you like, this is you, we recognize you. And if you do that, when you do that, it's going to be a real pain in your butt to have this layout used for these views. So, simplest solution, I like to create an authentication layout. And I've done this a few times. Let's come over here. So let's go grab this, put this here, and look at what we've got here. So we've got let's pull this over, a very similar head. We can even keep our fancy things. All right, so pulling all the same stuff in, but we're going to simplify our body. So I like to do just 3 parts, a header, a main, and then this is a fixed area for our flash messages. In the header, you can do your like application. And so I have a link, like this is the standard top left of your application, has the name of the application with a link to the root. And on the other side of the screen, I like to use this pattern. So we'll have a content for block for something I call alternative. We'll see how that's used in just a bit. If we don't have specified content for alternative, we'll just show a link to sign in and a link to sign up. Sometimes I will do aliases for sign in and sign up. And sometimes I don't. Let's do it this time. How to do an alias well? I mean, I don't know. This is how I like to do them explicitly. So get sign in. We're going to, I actually don't know why I did it in that order. I like this order better. Point it at a particular controller, a particular action, and give it an alias to help with our path helpers. So sign in is new session, sign up is new user. So we just show both of them there. Put a max width, center the content in main, show our flash messages. If we get around to it, we can add this stimulus controller. This is a very simple stimulus controller, which is going to fade out that element after some timeout. By default, I think it's 5 seconds is what I've used before. So we've got this new simple layout, which does not reference current user anywhere, right? And we can either in our actions or up at the top, but we might want to add back other actions like allow an authenticated user to view their profile, edit their profile, so forth and so on. So I prefer to do it in the actions themselves. Right? We'll just say for the new actions, we're going to render our authentication layout. So now let's come down here and clean up our views. Let's just delete views we're not going to use right now. really just need new. No, yeah, I can't delete them any faster here inside of Z. Ugh. So I didn't need to delete. I could have like left the form partials and used the forms, but I'll just inline them for now. Let's look at an example here. This is got way more stuff. This is a new user. Then we're going to have it first. So we're going to trim this down. Set up some content for alternative, right? So you can have some text. Already have an account, sign in, make it a little bit fancier. So in the context of sign up, we will provide the alternative in the top right. Instead of leaving sign in, sign up, like why click sign up, you're already on sign up. Just throw some text in the middle. Sign up now. We can, you can put some text about what you're doing. If you're wondering about any of the side projects I'm working on, here you go. Maybe I'll get around to fully finishing this. This is just something I want for myself. I wonder what Superlist says. While we're here, we'll just copy their no, this stuff isn't true. I don't really have like a good second bit of text. Okay, so you can do something like that. This is a whole. This is a whole second thing, a whole mess. That's some OAuth stuff. Let's try this other app. I think in this other app, we've just got a form. Yep. So it's not quite the form that we want, but it will work. I'll do email and password and password confirmation. I don't need this anymore. So if we come here and we go to sign up, I need to restart my server. Do I not have bcrypt in the jump? Okay. Let's get bcrypt in here. It must be because I'm also uploading while I'm streaming. These installs are so much slower while I'm streaming than they are when I'm not. Don't need you anymore. There we go. Let's try this again. Yes, we pulled this out of a partial. So we're going to need to change this layout. This layout is optimized for OAuth sign up, sign in. So you just have some buttons over here. So actually we've got some good Flex stuff on main. Let's just pull this out and see. On main, we put Tech Center. Are we applying? Tough. Of course. There we go. We need to make these form elements look a little bit prettier. Let's go. Grab some Talent UI. We will save this for later. We've got classes for our labels and for our inputs. Much better. Now on our form, I want to throw max width SM, text left. And let's just grab a button. Oops. And we can get some of their spacing here. Yeah, I'm not trying to win any design awards right now, but this is serviceable. Ooh, okay, so that's where it starts to get ugly. So let's go and get this done really quickly. Just grab these. And then we need to actually add it to our Tailwind config. Got it. We're going to need to sure that this comes in. Okay, progress. We're redirecting to user show. That it doesn't exist. But we have a sign up form in our authentication layout. So I lost that word. Simple enough, but gets the job done. Let's just take this and copy it for now over to sessions. And let's go look. What do we do for sessions? Let's tweak this a little bit. Just gotta sign in. Our alt text going to be a little bit different. Don't have an account, sign up. Then we're not dealing with a user. And we don't need password confirmation. Right. This form. Oh, this is that is scaffolded. Oops, here we go. Scaffolded junk. You just want to provide your email and password. Let's go sign in. We're going to change these button text. This is small things to tweak. All right, so basic stuff. Just want to do a tiny thing, which is that we don't really use Indigo. We've been sort of playing with orange as our primary color. So we're going to play with orange. Let's get a few things committed. Wrap those. And I can push this up. Okay, so we've got some views. Now we just need to wire them up and make them actually do things. So we need to get our controllers working. So our new action, all good. It's the create action. We need to make sure. User params, good to go. We save successfully. Redirecting is not quite. So we're not going to redirect there. We're going to redirect to the user root path, which is what we called our root inside of our authenticated constraint block. which is our tasks index page. And we also need to make sure to sign in our user. Now, in order to sign in our user, we need to take our authenticatable constraint and actually include it. And while we are here, we can start to think about how we want our default behavior to be. So what is common is to set up a before action. So by default, we presume that all of our routes are going to be protected routes, and we constrain ourselves to mark our public routes by skipping this before action. This is something you can see I do here, right? Separating unauthenticated from authenticated routes. And in this case, I didn't turn it on by default. Let's look. Well, I haven't gotten that far in this case. But we'll turn it on by default, right? This is a security win. And what that means is here, we can sort of take this pattern, which I like fine. So we've got, let's put them in the same order that they appear in. We're going to skip the authenticate bang before action. Right, and we're going to do the same with our sessions controller. But right now, I'm working on this. So after we save the user, we're going to sign that user in. This isn't quite the language that we want. That's a little bit better. Sign that user in and redirect them to the user root path. By signing them in, we are setting the cookie. By redirecting them to user root path, we are sending them to a constrained route. And our authenticated constraint will pull the session identifier out of the cookie, set current session, and these controllers now automatically, because of our default before action, will ensure that the user is authenticated, which is ensuring that there is a current session set, which means at this point, we definitely need to create our current model. Which I like to keep simple like this. So we will have a current session and a current user, but we can just set the current user implicitly when we set the current session. So logically, this feels sound. Let's write some commits. So this all looks good. Let us think about our sessions controller. So this got scaffolded as if it were any regular resource, but it is not any regular resource. We do not want a form that sends us a user ID, a user agent, and an IP address. We want to create a session by signing a user in. So this is going to need to be a user with an email and a password. And when we create a session, we are going to want to see if we can securely find a user with this email and password and then set a new session for them. Now, this is important to get right. So I want to come to authentication 0 and let's look at what they use. Talk about what they are doing. All right, so in their create, they're not using strong params. That's just like how you set up the form, I guess, right? So you've got this block, right, which is what we talked about. We're going to need to try to find a user securely by email and password. So what is this method, right? That is the key detail. If we go into their model generator and we look for authenticate by, we're not going to find it, right? This is a newish Rails method, Rails 7.1. And this is going to be the backbone of the new authentication that's going to be built into Rails 8. They've been slowly, very slowly, 20 years, but building in these core primitives to support authentication. And this was a real major step. Right, so you can read more about this here, but like the key details that you want to determine, can we find a user from this email and password? And you want to do that securely. And the most common insecure way to do that is to do it in such a way that you are vulnerable to timing-based enumeration attacks. And there are ways to make you not vulnerable to that, but you need to like know what you're doing. Authenticate by knows what it's doing, and you can just use it. So instead of just making a simple database query and like checking your password digest, Rails will do all of it for you and make sure that it does it in the proper secure way. You can go and read a lot more about like the implementation, but the key detail here is that like Rails, this is another instance like Rails is providing us with a lot of value, and it is wise to just leverage it and build on top of it, right? So we're going to use this Rails helper to securely determine, can we find a user? Let's go back to their controller. We aren't doing any of this, right? So inside of here, they got all of this mess. We have seen this, right? This is signing in a user. So we've got this. This is the new Ruby, what is this as of like 3.2, 3.3, shortened syntax for keyword arguments or hashes. If the variable name that is the value for the keyword argument or the hash is exactly the same as the key, it can be omitted. And this is the one use case I have found where I actually like using that feature, because I want a required keyword argument, because I want the method signature to be clear and communicative. And sign in user is very clear, very communicative. Sign in user gets a bit muddied. So if we do find the user, we sign them in and we redirect to our user root path. If we can't find the user, then he redirects back with an email hint, which is going to be used to repopulate the email field in the form and to set an alert. We can add that in ourselves later. And so to use our strong params user, we're actually just going to switch this out, because this is what we are actually going to be working with. And so now, in fact, we do have a user. And so email and password are fields on a user. This will render, this will work. Our strong params, our secure authentication check, signing in, redirecting, handling flashing. Wrong number of arguments given. What typo did I make? Oh, it's extend. What control action? I thought we were just hitting. Yes, our form is going to be going to users create. Right. We want to get that right. Let's, where are we? No. Sign in. All right, our routes are different. This is speed run slowing down. I have done so many OAuth versions recently. he's going to do where are your routes? Yeah, setting those up as well. We have sessions path. I don't think right now I need that alias. Typo. And now our strong params are broken. Can we just move it up? I will confess at this point, I'm freelancing. I've done like everything up to this a few different times, but I actually don't do email and password authentication. I don't like to do it anymore in my applications. I tend to use OAuth, and I roll my own OAuth. Don't even get me started on my rant on OmniAuth. So I am definitely out of practice on email and password authentication. But this is a great opportunity to get back into practice. Okay, so we can't, and that's okay. We're just going to do email, params email, and drop that. Ah, perfect. Now we're into the good stuff. It has a secure password, and it has many sessions. Yeah. This is we don't need all of that. This is a side note. ChatGPT has definitely like seen my clipboard and stuff. I don't think we need to do it here. What I have done before is added these methods and done I think it was base 32 encoded integers and then decoded them, done all that. But that is, or maybe it was base 36. Anyway, I don't recall right now. And not a necessary thing, just like one extra layer of a little bit of security by obscurity. But clearly I am using it over here. This is in our sign-in. And let me make sure my constraint is using find by ID. Yes, it is. Okay. These are the kinds of system tests I write. what has happened to our layout? Let's see here. I'm guessing that it has like morphed. And so it is. Yeah, our body here is not using all the classes. Oh wait, it is using those classes. Why does where is this white coming from? It's coming from, oh, I put all this stuff on HTML. Right. That is stupid. And the reason why it is stupid is that the HTML attribute is not morphed. This is something I have learned doing this exercise. We should put it on the body element. And Tailwind Forms has broken this. I think, can I put an appearance none on here? I don't have that class. No, I'm gonna have to do border none. And this 7 characters is no longer enough. Yeah, all right. We'll have to clean that up with Tailwind. The stuff that Tailwind is doing, but that is okay. Let's sign ourselves out. I don't have a way to sign out right now, so we're just going to hop into a console. We're going to do session delete all, user delete all. And we are back here to our root. We can sign up. I just want to go through the sign up flow. So let's do John at doe.com. His password can be password. Create that user. Oh, look at Google being helpful. And we are signed in, but the height isn't there. Okay, the HTML element is not morphed. Let us remind ourselves of that, which means our authenticate method needs to, our authentication layout needs to include these. Let's just make these hrefools. Have that take up the full height of the screen. And if we come back here, we delete all the sessions, but we leave our user. We can sign in again. John at doe.com and our password of password. And we sign in. So slow down a little bit there on the speed run. Nope, couple minor. That was the authenticatable concern. important. Move background color classes from HTML to body so that they work well with morphing. Ensure, come on, authentication layout has h4 classes on to work well with morphing to the application layout. User as many sessions and session as a cookie key constant. Get the sessions controller working properly to sign in. Users, whoops, amend that, add that, there we go, push it up. So we have users. Users can sign up, users can sign in. That gives us the foundation that we need to now scope tasks and lists to users. Users can own them, like be the creators of them. They can be the assignees of them. But that's going to have to be tomorrow's stream, which is probably going to be my last stream before I go on vacation. But let me do a quick recap of where we got today. Because it's a fair bit, and it's making this feel much more realistic, right? Authentication is a necessary step to take when you want to make an application realistic. So we have a distinction between public routes and authenticated routes. These are also public routes. They're just not user-facing routes. We enforce our authenticated routes not just at the controller layer with our before action authenticate bang, but at the routing layer itself, which gives us two benefits. The first benefit is that well, actually, I guess three benefits. The first benefit is that our routes file is much more communicative to us. We can see, just looking at the routes file, what are our public routes? What are our authenticated routes, right? Otherwise, when you're dependent purely on controllers, you can't tell the difference in your routes file between public and authenticated routes. You could use comments like this and try to keep it organized, but that leads to the second benefit. The second benefit is that our authenticated routes are actually going to be protected at like one of the earliest points in the Rails request lifecycle. And that means even if we screw up a controller, we forget, sometimes some applications default to you opt into the authenticate before action instead of opting out of it. And in those applications, if you forget to opt into it, you might expose an endpoint. And then the third benefit is that it's going to allow us to short circuit our authentication logic, and we have our current session in the most common case, which is an authenticated user accessing an authenticated route. That is also going to be our most performant case, which is a nice benefit. So, routes setup. In order to support that, we set up our authentication layout, which gives us a simple, not dependent on current user layout to drive our public user facing actions, which are sessions new and users new. We make sure that our models are properly validated and set up. We have our authenticatable controller concern to give us the functions that we need to sign in users, authenticate users, guard controller actions. And in our actual controllers, we are using our new layout in our get actions, and we are making sure that our post actions are doing things securely. This method has our secure sign in. Here we use the Rails authenticate by method to determine if we can authenticate a user securely. And you put all that together and you have, I would just say a little morph and turbo and all that on the auth stuff. Yeah, that makes as much sense as any. Let's just drop that. Drop morphing and view transitions for authentication views. There we go. You put all that together and you have authentication. Is it the most complicated authentication? No, it isn't. But is it insecure? Not insecure. It has strong, clear conventions that make it easy for us to ensure our application stays secure as it grows. We know when we have authenticated routes, we know where to put them. We don't have to opt into authentication constraint prevention in our controllers. We just need to put the resource or the route definition in the appropriate place in our routes file, because we opt all controller actions into being an authenticated action. We don't have to remember to opt new routes in. We just have to remember, which you will see, it'll blow up. You try to go to users new and you get an error if you forget to opt it out. So it is secure. It's secure by default. And it's also simple. All of the code is in your application. So it's easy to debug. It's easy to fix problems as they come up. But we're not doing really any, maybe here. Aside from like this bit right here, all of the rest of the security sensitive work is being managed by Rails. So we're not taking on the responsibility of knowing like, how do you check passwords securely? How do you store passwords securely? How do you try to authenticate a user with an email and password securely? What are all of the different vulnerabilities, timing vulnerabilities, enumeration vulnerabilities, like all these different things. So sure, we've rolled our own auth, but it's not like we are taking on a massive amount of responsibility around hardening our application. I find this to be a really nice middle ground where I can feel confident that if and when vulnerabilities come up, they are going to be patched by Rails, and we are leaning on Rails for the core security concerns. But for the glue code that builds on top of those concerns, instead of offloading that into a black box device and hoping that we never need to really clearly understand what it's doing, never need to change anything that it's doing, never need to fix something that has gone wrong in what it is doing, right? We keep the code in our application, we keep the code in our repository. We have written all of the code ourselves. We know what it's doing, why it's doing it, why it's there, how the pieces fit together. So when we need to evolve, right, we need to add OAuth. When we need to fix something, when we need to change something, that becomes so much more straightforward. And that is why I am a big proponent of rolling your own auth, keeping it in your application, keeping it as minimal as you need for that application. Don't do any more than you need. Um, Keep the surface area small, but also lean on Rails for the core security stuff. So that was a fun session. We got the core foundation set up. We have users. That's going to allow us to drive our assignee logic moving forward. We're going to be able to scope tasks and lists to particular users so that when John Doe signs in, he sees John Doe's tasks, but when Steven signs in, he sees Steven's tasks, and so forth and so on. We can now actually make this real. We can add a user profile screen and do all kinds of things. This is sort of the foundational step that needs to be made to make this production ready. So yeah, tomorrow we will build on top of this, get assignees going, see if we can make some progress with Duat. Migrate these things over to our anchored popovers so we can avoid these ridiculous z-index issues, clean up the problems caused by bringing in Tailwind forms, some of these small things. Yeah, let's see how close we can get to a cohesive, featureful application before I go on vacation. So thanks for hanging out again, and I will see who I see tomorrow. Let's stop sharing the screen and restore the chat, and I will see all of you all tomorrow.